Rule number one, never lose money. Rule number two, never forget rule number one.
Bitcoin is worthless artificial gold, which, if it succeeded, would facilitate a lot of illicit activity. Now, that is not something I think the world needs. And the fact that it's clever computer science doesn't mean that it should be widely used and that respectable people should encourage other people to speculate in it. Bitcoin reminds me of Oscar Wilde's definition of fox hunting, the pursuit of the uneatable by the unspeakable.
Well, that sounds better than what I used before.
We asked earlier, Charlie, Andrew brought it up with Warren, but...
I think it's a scumball activity. Does that better serve you better?
Thank you. Yeah. We asked earlier about Goldman Sachs getting into the business of having a trading desk for Bitcoin. Berkshire Hathaway owns about $2.5 billion of Goldman Sachs. Does it bother you, or does it not surprise you?
Well, I don't expect every investment bank to agree with everything I think. They have a lot of animal spirits in investment banking.
Bill, Charlie and Warren have weighed in on Bitcoin. Do you own any?
Somebody gave me some for my birthday. And then a few years later, I thought, hey, I'm going to sell that. So no. There's some really good technology in terms of sharing databases and verifying transactions that is talked about as blockchain. That is a good thing. Bitcoin and ICOs, I agree completely. It's one of the crazier speculative things where it's not as an asset class, you're not producing anything. And so you shouldn't expect it to go up. It's kind of a pure greater fool theory type investment. So, you know, I agree. I would short it if there was an easy way to do it.
One of the interesting things, if people react when you criticize their investment, if they get mad, they're gambling. You know, if somebody criticizes Apple or Berkshire, we like it. I mean, if the stock goes down, we'll buy more of it because it's we don't care whether it's just we don't feel that it has anything to do with it. But if we criticize something that they own because they only want it to go up tomorrow, they feel we are hurting them, and therefore they get very upset about it. If they really like what they own, what difference would it make? You know, if I criticize their wife or something, they don't get all upset about it.
Wait a minute. That's a bad habit.
Yeah, probably not the perfect example to use.
At one point this weekend, you said that Bitcoin, and this was basically, you were asked, Charlie said Bitcoin's like rat poison. You were asked about that comment, and you said, well, it's probably more like rat poison squared. Charlie went on in the meeting to then basically call Bitcoin turds.
He is an expressive sort, isn't he? Maybe when he gets a little older, he'll mature.
I just want to ask you about that because it sparked so much controversy, and particularly on Twitter and some of the places where you might expect people who are trading in cryptocurrency to be pretty loud about what they heard. What is it about Bitcoin that gets you guys so fired up?
Well, when you buy a farm, you look at the crop every year and what prices are, and you decide whether it was a satisfactory investment. I mean, you look to the asset itself and what it produces for you. When we buy a business, we look at what the business earns and decide how we feel about it in terms of what we paid. But we are buying something that at the end of the period, we not only have what we bought in the first place, but we have something that the asset produced. And when you buy non-productive assets, all you're counting on is whether the next person is going to pay you more because they're even more excited about another next person coming along. But the asset itself is creating nothing. One of the interesting things, for example, is gold. If you go back to the time of Christ and you look at how many hours of labor you had to give up in order to buy an ounce of gold, and you take it forward to now, you'll find the compound rate maybe 1/10 or 2/10 of 1%. And then you have to insure it during that time and make sure somebody doesn't steal it from you and everything. But it doesn't produce anything. And productive assets, you can pay too much for a productive asset. But I bought a farm in the 1980s, and every year look at how much it produced the way of soybeans and corn. And at the end of that period, I've still got the farm, and I've gotten some significant income off of it. Apartment house, operating business. But if you and I buy various cryptocurrencies, they're not going to multiply. They're not going to be a bunch of rabbits sitting there in front of us. They're just going to sit there. And I got to hope next time you get more excited after I bought it from you, and then maybe I'll get more excited and buy it from you. And actually, we could sit in the house by ourselves, and we could keep running up the price between the two of us. But at the end of the time, there's one Bitcoin sitting there, and now we got to find somebody else. And they come to an end. I mean, those.
So, that's a greater fool theory. That's what you're saying.
Well, yeah, it's buying something because you expect the pool of people who want to buy it because they want to sell it to somebody else will grow, and it's wonderful because it does create a rising price. Does create more buyers, and people think I've got to get in on this, and it's better if they don't understand it. That's the other thing about non-productive. If you don't understand it, you get much more excited than if you understand it. I mean, if you buy a bond that says it's going to pay you 4% a year, you're not going to get any pleasant surprises. She's going to pay you 4% a year. But if you can have anything you want to imagine. If you just look at something and say that's magic, you can do it with shark's teeth or seashells or anything. And they did it with tulips in the 17th century in Amsterdam, and they'll do it again. I mean, people, they like to speculate, they like to gamble, and if you can get something, particularly if you have something half plausible going on, if you had bought gold in 1942 and you say, we might lose the war and we might have to run off to some other country, and so let's put our assets in gold, you would have less than a penny for every dollar you got from owning stocks. Less than a penny. Now, if somebody calls that a store of value, I mean, I think they're delusionary.
Okay. Andrew has a question, too. Andrew.
Hey, Warren, related to this issue of Bitcoin, you saw that Goldman Sachs just last week announced that they were going to create effectively a trading operation around cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin in particular. You've been an investor in Goldman. What do you think of their decision to do that?
Well, they probably think that lots of people are going to get very excited about it. Well, and maybe already are, but they think there's money to be made trading them. I don't think they're expressing an opinion on the ultimate value. I would be very surprised if the top partners of Goldman are selling their Goldman stock and putting it into Bitcoin. But I want to cover this subject now because my friend Charlie will come on at 8 o'clock and he'll tell you what he will say.
Well, that's my whole entire point. I do want to ask Charlie about it because I think when he talked about the turds, he was referring to this. He said if you're trading this, it's like watching other people trading turds and deciding you want to get a piece of that.
Well, you're not going to get me to comment on that.
Hopefully Charlie's not awake and not watching right now.
Well, the truth is people do trade on very crazy things over time. Imagine people selling their homes to buy a tulip in Amsterdam. If people think they're going to make money the next day, and worse yet, if they think somebody else that they know is going to make money and they aren't going to make money, it just draws people in. I could whisper something on this program, and kind of the more sillier it was, the more it might react, because there's no quantitative limits. If you buy a stock, you say, well, I'll buy it at 15 times earnings, but I won't buy it at 20 times earnings. But when you get into something that doesn't produce anything, there's no checkpoints. There's nothing to reference it to. It's just, it's gone up, so it'll keep going.
Now, I will say.
Yes, well, if you invest the way people gamble in casinos, you're not going to do very well. So it's the long-term investment that works best. But if you like the action of investing, sometimes winning, sometimes losing, just like people like the action when they gamble in a casino, those people are not my people. I like the long-term investors. who figure out something that's going to work over the long term and buy that. And the sooner the Chinese people gamble less and invest patiently for the long term more, the sooner they will do better.
Our special guest this morning is the chairman and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett. And Warren, we've talked about a lot of things this morning. We got briefly your thoughts on the markets, but there's been a lot that's happened in the markets since the last time we sat down with you. Volatility is back in a big way, and that has the average retail investor kind of questioning what to do at this point. It's scared a lot of people. What do you think's happening right now, just in terms of the return of volatility? Is it something to be worried about? What's causing it?
Well, if you own stocks like you'd own a farm or apartment house, you don't get a quote on those every day or every week. And I think you look at the business, and the value of American business depends on how much it delivers in cash to its owners over between now and Judgment Day. And I don't think it changes in 10% in a 2-month period if you're looking at it as a business. Now you've got anything can happen in markets. I mean, anything can happen in markets, and that's why I say don't ever borrow money against securities. That markets don't have to open tomorrow. I mean, you can have extraordinary events. So I think to some extent you can get some of the instruments that people don't understand very well that have a lot of firepower in them.
Like
and
the volatility
they
index and things that are tied to that.
The idea of people taking a position, and they're gambling, they're not investing. Nobody's investing when they buy, some supercharged index on how the VIX does or something like that. They don't need it in their life. It's an unnecessary instrument. Now, they will create instruments that the public will buy, and you can just count on that. Wall Street's been doing that since they met under the Buttonwood tree in 1792 or whatever it was on the exchange. So, but if you're investing, if I'm going to buy a half interest in a McDonald's stand and you're going to run it, or McDonald's franchise, and you're going to run it, I look to the business to determine whether I made a good investment. And I'm concerned about, whether we have new competition, how we do over the years. But it's the business I look at. When you're just looking at the price of something, you're not investing. I mean, if you buy something, Bitcoin, for example, or some cryptocurrency, you're not looking to the asset itself to produce anything. If you buy an apartment house, you're looking at how the apartment house does. If you buy a farm, you're looking at the farm does. If you buy a whole business, you're looking at how the business does. If you buy a part of a business, why shouldn't you look at how the business is going to do? But people get charmed by lots of action and the fact that things are liquid and all of that. And it does have repercussions back into the market when you get something like, an ETN arrangement on the, supercharged on the VIX. I mean, where you can lose 90% of your money in one day. I mean, that really doesn't belong with the word investment. I mean, it's a gambling form of activity.
देखिए आज समा बन गया है सीएनबीसी आवाज पर आप देख रहे हैं मुनाफे की तैयारी और दमदार एक्सपर्ट्स देखिए हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं विजय केडिया साहब को आज हमारे स्पेशल गेस्ट हैं जिनको हमने आमंत्रण दिया और केडिया साहब बहुत सारे मैसेजेस आ रहे हैं आज हमें कि आप बहुत लोगों के प्रिय हैं और वो सब हमें लिख रहे हैं कि आपने आज सीएनबीसी आवाज पर आकर सीएनबीसी आवाज पर जो बात करी वो बहुत ही बढ़िया करी तो शुक्रिया एक बार फिर से आने के लिए और गाइडेंस हमारे दर्शकों को देने के लिए कुछ और बढ़िया बातें बताइए शेयर बाजार के बारे में जो हमारे दर्शकों को फॉलो करनी चाहिए आपके एक्सपीरियंस से ताकि वो फायदा कमा सकें।
देखिए मेरा तो सबको यही सलाह रहता है और सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट ये है कि एक तो शेयर बाजार में पहले तो ये समझ लीजिए कि ये कोई रातों रात करोड़पति बनने का कोई प्लेटफॉर्म नहीं है ये नहीं यहाँ पे क्या वो हम लोग बचपन में पढ़े ना धीरे धीरे रे मना धीरे सब कुछ होए माली सींचे सो गड़ा ऋतु आए फल होए
जी
शेयर बाजार की स्टोरी ये है अगर आप इसको 10 साल 15 साल का व्यू रखते हैं तो आप यहाँ पर वेल्थ क्रिएट कर सकते हैं और क्वार्टरली और हाफ ईयरली और 1 साल का व्यू रखेंगे तो अल्टीमेटली आपके हाथ में यहाँ पर कुछ भी नहीं आने का है तो पहले तो वो अपने दिमाग से हटा दे कि मेरे को जल्दी जल्दी करोड़पति बनने का है
2 साल में वॉरेन बुफे नहीं बनना चाहिए
हाँ वो नहीं बन सकते हैं सर सही है ये उसके लिए टाइम लगता है 15 साल 20 साल कोई भी आप करियर है लाइफ में कोई भी आप करियर चुने तो इसको आप एक करियर जैसे चुने आप इसको जुआ का सट्टा बाजार अगर नहीं चुने उसको मेरा एक कोट है कि मार्केट रिवॉर्ड्स यू एज पर योर परसेप्शन इफ यू थिंक इट्स ए गैम्बलिंग देन इट विल प्रूव ए गैम्बल फॉर यू
सही है
तो अगर जुए का अड्डा समझेंगे तो जुआ प्रूफ होगा और तो मेरे को एक तो ये लगता है दूसरा लगता है कि ट्रेडिंग से बच के रहें क्योंकि मैंने ऐसे ऐसे लोगों को मैं जानता हूं जो 10 साल 15 साल की अपनी कमाई 1 महीने में, 2 महीने में, 3 महीने में सट्टे में उड़ा दीजिए उन्होंने।
सही है।
ट्रेडिंग करके फ्यूचर ऑप्शन, मेरा ट्रेडिंग से मतलब है मेनली फ्यूचर ऑप्शन।
सही है।
उस पर जरूर ध्यान रखें क्योंकि वो एकदम जैसे आपको आइडिया है नहीं और आप प्लेन चला रहे हैं, तो वो प्लेन भी जाएगा, आप भी जाएंगे, लोगों को साथ में मारेगा, अपनी फैमिली को भी आप बर्बाद करोगे उसके साथ।
बिल्कुल सही है।
तो उनको समझें, उसमें जो सक्सेस रेट है वो 1% से भी कम है। उसके लिए अगर आपको एक्सपीरियंस हो जाए 10-15 साल का शेयर बाजार के अंदर में, और आप अपने पोर्टफोलियो का अगर 1% 2% अगर आप ट्रेडिंग में करते हैं एक्सपीरियंस के लिए, ट्राई करने के लिए, तब तक तो ठीक है। लेकिन ट्रेडिंग पर निर्भर रह के अगर आप शेयर बाजार में सक्सेस हासिल करना चाहेंगे तो ये बहुत मुश्किल होगा।
Jack Bogle, who I talked about in the annual report, Jack Bogle has probably done more for the American investor than any man in the country. Jack, could you stand up? There he is. Jack Bogle, many years ago, he wasn't the only one that was talking about an index fund, but it wouldn't have happened without him. I mean, Paul Samuelson talked about it, Ben Graham even talked about it, but the truth is it was not in the interest of the investment industry of Wall Street. It was not in their interest actually to have the development of an index fund, the index fund, because it brought down fees dramatically. And as we've talked about some in the reports and other people have commented, index funds overall have delivered for shareholders a result that has been better than Wall Street professionals as a whole. And part of the reason for that is that they brought down the costs very significantly. So when Jack started, very few people, certainly Wall Street, did not applaud him. And he was the subject of some derision and a lot of attacks. And now we're talking trillions when we get into index funds. And we're talking a few basis points when we talk about investment fees in the case of index funds, but still hundreds of basis points when we talk about fees elsewhere. And I estimate that Jack, at a minimum, has left in the pockets of investors without hurting them overall in terms of performance at all, gross performance. He's put tens and tens and tens of billions into their pockets, and those numbers are going to be hundreds and hundreds of billions over time. So it's Jack's 88th birthday on Monday. So I just say happy birthday, Jack, and thank you on behalf of American investors. And Jack, I've got great news for you. You're going to be 88 on Monday, and in only 2 years, you'll be eligible for an executive position at Berkshire. So hang in there, buddy.
Let me add a few thoughts about your own investments. Most investors, both institutional and individual, will find that the best way to own common stocks is through an index fund that charges minimal fees. Those following this path are sure to beat the net results after fees and expenses delivered by the great majority of investment professionals. This is the part of Warren Buffett's 1996 letter to shareholders that the man at the beginning of this video is referencing when he questions Warren Buffett.
Good morning. My name is Ted Friedman. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. You said in the 1996 annual report that most investors will find that the best way to own common stocks is in an index fund that charges minimal fees. 2 questions. First, there are a lot of different index funds that hold different baskets of stocks. What criteria would you use or recommend to select an appropriate index fund? Second, the price to earnings ratio of the S&P 500 is significantly higher than its historical average. What benchmark should an investor use in purchasing this index?
Yeah, I would say that in terms of the index fund, I would just take a very broad index. I would take the S&P 500 as long as I wasn't putting all my money in at one time. If I were going to put money into a index fund in relatively equal amounts over a 20 or 30 year period, I would pick a fund, and I know Vanguard has very low costs. I'm sure there are a whole bunch of others that do. I just haven't looked at the field, but I would be very careful about the costs involved because all they're doing for you is buying that index. I think that the people who buy those index funds on average will get better results than the people that buy funds that have higher costs attached to them, because it's just a matter of math. If you have a very high percentage of funds being institutionally managed, and a great many institutions charge a lot of money for doing it and others charge a little, they're going to get very similar gross results but different net results. And I recommend to all of you reading John Bogle's written a couple of books in the last 5 years, and I can't give you the titles, but they're very good books, and anybody investing in funds should read those books before investing, or if you've already invested, you still should read the books, and it's all you need to know really about fund investing. So I would pick a broad index, but I wouldn't toss a chunk in at any one time. I would do it over a period of time, because the very nature of index funds is that you are saying, I think America's business is going to do reasonably well over a long period of time, but I don't know enough to pick the winners, and I don't know enough to pick the winning times. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't know enough to pick the winning times. Occasionally I think I know enough to pick a winner, but not very often. And I certainly can't pick winners by going down through the whole list and saying this is a winner and this isn't, and so on. So the important thing to do, if you have an overall feeling that business is a reasonable place to have your money over a long period of time, is to invest over a long period of time and not make any bet implicitly by putting a big chunk in at a given time.
I think everybody had as much fun as ever. I mean, we had a crowd that certainly equaled our record, and again, I run into thousands of shareholders, and they're all having a good time here, and our directors have a good time. So it's just sort of a Mardi Gras.
Was there anything different about this meeting, or is it the sameness that makes it so special?
It's the sameness, pretty much. I mean, working with Charlie Munger, we're not going to change the format very much.
Although Brian pointed out earlier that there were a lot of kind of controversial subjects, a lot of things that caught people's attention and picked up a lot of news this time. And it's because you and Charlie say what you think, especially Charlie.
Yeah, Charlie says exactly what he thinks. And he thinks in colorful language, too. Have you noticed that?
I have noticed that. Has that changed over the years, or is that just more the same?
That's Charlie.
Yeah, that's Charlie. And since you met him?
Since 1959, when I met him.
Okay. Warren, let's talk about some of the things that really resonated with people, and maybe start where you began the annual meeting this year, and that was talking to your investors and telling them a little bit about investing, some tips and lessons along the way. You kind of used it as a teaching experience at the top.
Yeah, normally I don't do that. I mean, in fact, I can't remember when I did it. We just go right into questions and answers. But I really thought that maybe we were giving a little bit the wrong lesson. Because all the questions would naturally tend toward current events. And so this time I went back actually to 1942 when I bought my first stock, as an illustration of all the things that have happened since 1942. We've had 14 presidents, 7 Republicans, 7 Democrats. We've had world wars. We had 9/11. We had the Cuban Missile Crisis. We have all kinds of things. The best single thing you could have done on March 11th, 1942, when I bought my first stock, was just buy an index fund and never look at a headline, never think about stocks anymore, just like you would do if you bought a farm. You just buy the farm and let the tenant farmer run it for you. And I pointed out that if you'd put $10,000 in an index fund that reinvested dividends, and I paused for a moment to let the audience try and guess how much it amount to, and it would come to $51 million now. And the only thing you had to really believe in then is that America would win the war, and that America would progress as it has ever since 1776, and that American business, if America moved forward, American business would move forward. You didn't have to worry about what stock to buy. You didn't have to worry what day to get in and out. You didn't know the Federal Reserve would exist, whatever it might be. And America works.
Last month on Louis Rukeyser, you summed up your investment philosophy as buy everything and hold it forever. Do you still subscribe to that in light of what the market has been doing, or would you unload some things now?
No, my theory is not subject to the ups and downs, the peregrinations of the stock, the unpredictable peregrinations of the stock market. It's painful to do, but I think the idea of owning the stock market is the best approach to equity investing, and perhaps I didn't make that thoroughly clear there. I have never felt that equities should be the only portion of an investor's long-term program. I myself am about 50% stocks, 50% bonds, for example. I was brought up when I came into this business in 1951 with the Wellington Fund, which was and is, and I hope always will be, a conservative balanced fund. But I think the idea of buying and holding forever and not trying to make adjustments requires that you've gotten it right in the first place. That you can only hold tight if you've bought right, if you will. And that is to say, have an asset allocation that has something to do with how many years you have to accumulate money, how much resources you have at stake, how much income you need, and how much courage you have to ride out the peregrinations of the market. So you've got to take all that into account from that simple statement.
You are the godfather of index funds aimed at the average investor, and this questioner points out that actively managed funds have outperformed indexed over the last 2 years. Is there a case then for market timing? What should you do when the index funds are losing money?
Well, as my friend Jim Glassman quoted me in his op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, it's a quote I don't even remember where I made, but it said, I don't know anybody who has ever been successful in timing the market. I don't even know anybody who knows anybody who has ever been successful in timing the market. Last year, these last 2 years, the index, S&P index, has outperformed roughly half of the funds, a little bit less last year, just about half this year. I don't regard that as a significant long-term sign at all. First of all, the number of funds is not a relevant statistic. We use it because it's convenient, but if you've got a few little funds in there that do well, they count just as much as a few big funds. The reality is, no matter what the statistics tell you, indexing always wins. I say that because index is delivering a market return, and all those investors out there are by definition getting the market return themselves, less cost. So if statistics don't capture that index advantage, it will be corrected in the next year or the next year. And by the way, if you look at even the last 15 years, counting those last 2 years, the index has outperformed about 75% of all active managers.
Someone out there will want to take careful notes here because we're going to go from the general to the very specific. For the past 15 months, I've been investing $1,200 per month in Schwab mutual funds. He or she doesn't say which Schwab funds. Should I continue, or is there a better place for that money these days?
Well, far be it for me to get into more trouble with Mr. Schwab than I'm in already. But leaving aside the infinite variety of a stock of mutual funds they could be buying through any kind of a mutual fund marketplace like Charles Schwab's, the answer is yes, continue to invest. I've told particularly young people in the office who are really petrified by this market decline that it's the best thing that ever happens to them. And if you think about it logically, of course it's wonderful. I mean, think of, say, the young man I was talking to yesterday who's probably 25 or 26 years old, and he's got the rest of his life in invest. And I said, well, let's suppose that Chris Scott, his name is. I said, let's suppose, Chris, that the market's going to end up at Jim Glassman's 36,000 by the time you retire. Do you want to be investing all your money when the Dow is at 35,000, or invest it all when it's 9,000? Just think about that for a minute. In other words, you want a long time to invest at low prices, and it's certainly a frightening advantage for those of us who have some money at work in the market today to think of this as a blessing. But it is a blessing because in the long run, investing depends on accumulating money at sound prices and not inflated prices like we have. I also think the general economy and the financial markets are well served by a return to reality. When you leave reality and depart from the laws of gravity, there's nothing but bad things that can happen, and the higher you fly, the more you fall. We flew quite high enough, and I think it's a blessing, maybe a blessing in heavy disguise, a blessing that we've come back a little bit toward the ground.
Speaking of coming back toward the ground, This investor's stocks are really down. Dr. Koop, just for feet. Is that Quigley Pharmaceuticals? Cisco, Lucent Technologies. Should I sell?
I haven't heard a list like that. He even makes those tech funds I told you about seem like heroes. I don't have any comment on those individual stocks. I mean, they are hugely depressed. I think Dr. Koop, I read the other day, is in danger, the stock is in danger of becoming delisted. I think it's sold up in the mid-30s, $30 and now is something like 19 cents. You know, it wasn't a good turn. And it's very painful for people, for speculators, or people that greed overwhelm their good judgment to get hurt. But will they bounce back? I mean, I guess the answer to that group of stocks, without knowing much about Quigley's Pharmaceutical and being very nervous about Dr. Koop, is, you know, companies like Lucent will come back in time. I don't think there's much question about that. But to own a handful of individual stocks, I don't think is sound investing. And to obviously jump on the bandwagon at a silly time is, you know, I feel very, very sorry for the investor, but I don't know how to help him now, him or her.
I never know what markets are going to do. I know what markets are going to do over a long period of time. They're going to go up. But in terms of what's going to happen in a day or a week or a month or a year even, I've never felt that I knew it, and I've never felt it was important. We're almost always a buyer of stocks, and we're a more aggressive buyer when they're going down. I mean, I feel much better when they're going down. I think every business should be run as efficiently as possible. And some are and some aren't. We try to buy the ones that are. I mean, I bought my first stock in April of 1942. I was 11. Pearl Harbor had happened 3 or 4 months earlier. We were losing the war. I mean, if you want to talk about a bad outlook for the country's not going to go away. The plants aren't going to go away. The people aren't going to go away. The talents aren't going to go away. The country will grow in value over time. Now, who gets it is another question. But
in my whole life, I've never succeeded much in something I wasn't interested in. So I don't think you're going to succeed if what you're doing all day doesn't interest you. And without lifetime learning, you people are not going to do very well. You are not going to get very far in life based on what you already know.
You actually start a law firm.
I had no alternative.
And then you actually...
I had an army of children almost immediately. I painted myself in quite a corner.
Need motivation? Watch this top 10 with Believe Nation. Believe Nation. What's up, Believe Nation? It's Evan. My one word is believe, and I believe in you. I believe you have Michael Jordan level talent at something, and I want you to find it, embrace it, and use it to make a difference. So let's get your motivation to a 10 and get you believing in you. Grab a snack and chew in today's lessons from a man who went from studying meteorology, dropping out of college to join the U.S. Army, to then becoming the billionaire business partner of Warren Buffett. He's Charlie Munger, and here's my take on his top 10 rules of success, Volume 2. Okay, let's kick it off with rule number 1. Pursue your interests.
In terms of picking what to do, I want to report to all of you that in my whole life, I've never succeeded much in something I wasn't interested in. So I don't think you're going to succeed if what you're doing all day doesn't interest you. And you've got to find something you're interested in, because it's just too much to expect of human nature that you're going to be very good at something you deeply dislike doing. And so that's one big issue. And of course, you have to play in a game where you've got some unusual talents. You do not want to play, if you're 5'1", you don't want to play basketball against a guy that's 8'3". It's just too hard. And so you got to figure out a game where you have an advantage, and it has to be something you're deeply interested in.
Rule number 2, be a continuous learning machine.
Wisdom acquisition was a moral duty. It's not something you do just to advance in life. Wisdom acquisition is a moral duty. And And there's a corollary to that proposition, which is very important. It means that you're hooked for lifetime learning. And without lifetime learning, you people are not going to do very well. You are not going to get very far in life based on what you already know. You're going to advance in life by what you're going to learn after you leave here. If you take Berkshire Hathaway, which is certainly one of the best regarded corporations in the world, and it may have the best long-term investment record in the entire history of civilization. The skill that got Berkshire through one decade would not have sufficed to get it through the next decade with the achievements made. Without Warren Buffett being a learning machine, continuous learning machine, the record would have been absolutely impossible. The same is true at lower walks of life. I constantly see people rise in life who were not the smartest, sometimes not even the most diligent, but they are learning machines. They go to bed every night a little wiser than they were when they got up. And boy, does that habit help, particularly when you have a long run ahead of you.
Rule number 3, find your true path.
You actually start a law firm and then practice law for some period of time.
Well, I had no alternative.
And then you actually...
I had an army of children almost immediately. I painted myself in quite a corner.
Yeah. So zero choice is pretty powerful.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes, of course.
So you practice law and then you leave law in the firm that you helped found and move over to investments.
Well, but
help us understand that.
That sounds miraculous. In fact, it was rather interesting. I probably got paid about $350,000 in my first 13 years of law practice total. And I had an army of children and no capital to start with. And when I chose this alternative career, I had over $300,000 in liquid instruments. So I had, and that was 10 years of living expenses. So I was not a courageous, venturesome, admirable man. I was a cautious little squirrel, saving up more nuts than I really needed and not going very deep into my pile of nuts. And so it wasn't that courageous, and I kept one foot in the law firm while I tried my capitalist career. But as soon as the capitalist career succeeded, I intended to lift that second foot because I recognized that the potential of law practice, as I saw it then, I didn't anticipate the boom that came to the big firms. I just saw it as being more difficult, and I wanted more independence than I was going to have as a lawyer. I hated sending other people invoices and needing money from richer people. I thought it was undignified. I wanted my own money. Not because I loved ease or social prestige. I wanted the independence.
Rule number 4, don't super specialize.
I was wondering how you can thrive as a polymath in a world that celebrates specialization.
Well, that's a good question. I don't think operating over many disciplines, as I do, is a good idea for most people. I think it's fun, that's why I've done it. And I'm better at it than most people would be. And I don't think I'm good at being the very best at handling differential equations. So it's in a wonderful path for me, but I think the correct path for everybody else is to specialize and get very good at something that society rewards and they get very efficient at doing. But even if you do that, I think you should spend 10 or 20% of your time into trying to know all the big ideas in all the other disciplines. Otherwise, I use the same phrase over and over again. Otherwise, you're like a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest. This is not going to work very well. You have to know the big ideas in all the disciplines to be safe if you have a life lived outside a cave.
Rule number 5, clone great ideas.
Well, cloning is, of course, it's not an ambiguous word when you use it biologically. But when you take it into some other field, cloning is a very interesting idea. You do remove ideas from one place and bring them into another. And if that's cloning, I do it all the time. Of course, it's useful, if I were you people, to look at what other people you regard as great investors are doing for ideas. The trouble with it is that if you pick people as late in the game as Berkshire Hathaway,
Right.
you're buying our limitations caused by size.
Sure.
You really need to do it from some guy that's operating in smaller places and finding places with more advantage. And of course, it's hard to identify the people in the small game. But it's not an idea that won't work. If I were you people, of course, I would do that.
What do you mean?
I would want to know exactly what the shrewd people were doing, and I would look at every one of them, of course. That would be a no-brainer for me.
Rule number 6, cherish old-fashioned values.
I look at my background as absolutely privileged. I'm proud of being an Omaha boy. I sometimes use the old saying, they got the boy out of Omaha, but they never got Omaha out of the boy. And so that, all those old-fashioned values, family comes first, be in a position so you can help others when troubles come, prudent, sensible, moral duty to be reasonable, more important than anything else, more important than being rich, more important than being important. An absolute moral duty, because none of my intelligent relatives suffered terribly because they didn't advance higher.
Rule number 7, destroy bad ideas.
You said that any year in which you don't destroy one of your best loved ideas is a wasted year. It's well known that you helped coax Warren towards quality, which was a difficult transition for him. I was wondering if you could speak to the hardest idea that you've ever destroyed.
Well, I've done so many dumb things that I'm very busy destroying bad ideas because I keep having them. And so it's hard for me to just single out one from such a multitude. But I actually like it when I destroy a bad idea because I think I'm on the right. I think it's my duty to destroy old ideas. I know so many people whose main problem of life is that the old ideas displace the entry of new ideas that are better. That is the absolute standard outcome in life. There's an old German folk saying that describes it. It says, we're too soon old and we're too late smart. That's everybody's problem. And the reason we're too late smart is the stupid ideas we already have, we can't get rid of. Now, it's a good thing that we have that problem. In marriage, that may be good for the stability of marriage, that we stick with our old ideas. But in most fields, you want to get rid of your old ideas. And it's a good habit. And it gives you a big advantage in the competitive game of life since other people are so very bad at it. What happens is, as you spout ideas out, what you're doing is you're pounding them in. And so you get these ideas and then you start agitating and saying them and so forth. And of course, the person you're really convincing is you who already have the ideas. You're just pounding them in harder and harder. One of the reasons I don't spend much time telling the world what I think about how the Federal Reserve System should behave and so forth is I know that I'm just pounding the ideas into my own head when I think I'm telling other people how to run things. So I think you have to have mental habits that I don't like it when the young people get violently convinced on every damn cause or something. I think they know everything. Some 17-year-old wants to tell the whole world what should be done about abortion or foreign policy in the Middle East or something. All he's doing when he or she spouts about what he deeply believes is pounding the ideas he already has in, which is a very dumb idea when you're just starting and have a lot to learn. So it's very important, that habit of getting rid of the dumb ideas. And one of the things I do is pat myself on the back every time I get rid of a dumb idea. And you say, well, can you really reinforce your own good behavior? Yeah, you can. If other people won't praise you, you can praise yourself. I have a big system of patting myself on the back. Every time I get rid of a much beloved idea, I pat myself on the back, sometimes several times. And I recommend this same mental habit to all of you. The price we pay for being able to accept a new idea is just awesomely large.
Rule number 8, evolve.
Berkshire and Warren and you were known as value investors. Is that not the core discipline of Berkshire Hathaway anymore, or does that not even matter?
Well, you got to remember that in our way of thinking, all intelligent investment is value investment. Because why would you want to buy something which wasn't worth as much as you were paying for it? And who wouldn't like buying something for less than it's worth? So the only difference when people talk about value investor, you're always a value investor. Now, there are various ways to look for value investments, just as there are various places to fish. And if the first rule of fishing is to fish where the fish are, the first rule of value investing is to find some place to fish for value investments where there are a lot of them. And of course, it's gotten hard in the United States to find easy value investments because the world is so competitive. And that accounts for a lot of what you see in Berkshire, where we buy securities like Apple that we wouldn't have bought in the old days when we had more mundane things that were serving us very well. So we're just looking in different places, but we're value investors.
And so
some people, when they say value investor, they mean somebody that emphasizes working capital or something, meaning you should fish in that particular place. But I think that's all, I think it's a bad use of the language to think there's a difference between value investing and other good investing. All good investing is value investing, by definition. And so they're just various places to fish for value investments. And of course, as the world gets tougher, you have to fish in places you didn't fish before.
Rule number 9, think like a business owner.
Coming to business, not as business school graduates, but as people who had owned portfolios of securities, we thought like capitalists because we were always in the shareholder mindset. And a lot of people running the businesses think like careerists. And believe me, you got to think like a careerist to some extent if you're in a career. But it also helps to look at the business strategy problems as though you're an owner. And so my advice to you is you don't want to never get to be a careerist so much you don't see it from the owner's point of view. That's what General Motors did. They had a bunch of careerists, and an owner would have seen immediately that the situation was hopeless. And they just romped through it with a lot of denial and stupidity and pomposity. And of course, they went bankrupt. The mightiest company in the world went bankrupt. And none of those hotshot executives thought like an owner. They would have seen that it was hopeless.
And rule number 10, the last home before a very special bonus clip, is have fun.
That's Charlie. I'm Warren. You can tell us apart because he can hear and I can see. That's why we work together so well. We each have our specialty. What's your dream now? He says.
My dream? Well.
Let's skip the first one.
Sometime when I'm especially wishful, I think, oh, to be 90 again.
Charlie says all he wants to know is where he'll die, so he'll never go there. And so you. But life has been awfully good to me and Charlie, so we have no complaints.
What you don't want to be is like the man And they held his funeral, and the minister said, now it's the time for somebody to say something nice about the deceased. And nobody came forward, and nobody came forward. He said, surely somebody can say something nice about the deceased, and nobody came forward. And finally one man came up and he said, well, he said, his brother was worse.
Now I've got a really special bonus Charlie Munger clip on how to aim low that I think you're really going to enjoy. But before that, it's time for the 3-point landing questions. It's time to move from just watching another video to actually taking some kind of action in your life or in your business. So answer these questions on your own at home, talk about them with a friend, or leave the replies in the comments below. Here we go. Question number 1. What bad idea do you need to destroy? Question number 2. What change in your thinking do you need to make to think like the business owner that you want to be? And question number 3, what new interesting thing are you going to learn this week? Thank you guys so much for watching. I believe in you. I hope you continue to believe in yourself. And whatever your one word is, much love. I'll see you soon, and enjoy the bonus clip.
As you look back on your life experience, what's the most important piece of advice that you would offer everyone in the room tonight as they look forward into their futures?
Well, there are a few obvious ones. They're all ancient. Ben Franklin, marriage is like the most important decision you have, not your business career. It'll do more for you, good or bad, than anything else. And Ben Franklin had the best advice ever given on marriage. He said, keep your eyes wide open before marriage and half shut thereafter. It's amazing how if you just get up every morning and keep plugging and have some discipline and keep learning, and it's amazing how it works out okay. And I don't think it's wise to have an ambition to be president of the United States or a billionaire or something like that, because the odds are too much against you. Much better to aim low. I did not intend to get rich. I wanted to get independent. I just overshot. And and by the way, while you're clapping, some of the overshooting was accidental. There's a big, you can be very deserving and very intelligent and very disciplined, but there's also a factor of luck that comes into this thing. And the people who get the outcomes that seem extraordinary, they're the people who have discipline and intelligence and good virtue, plus a hell of a lot of luck. Why wouldn't the world work like that? So you shouldn't give credit for the unusual. A lot of the people, a friend of mine said about a colleague of his in his fraternity, he says, old George was a duck sitting on a pond and they raised the level of the pond. There are a lot of people that just luck into the right place and rise, and there are a lot of very eminent people who have many advantages, and they've got one little flaw or one bit of bad luck, and they're mired in misery all their lives. But that makes it interesting to have all this variation.
Altruistic, world domination, honey empire, right? I'm grateful. I understand why I'm here.
I think because I am so open.
I wanted to think and say, it's a bloody brief life.
All of you have the potential for enormous success.
If you want to know what Gary Vee, DJ Khaled, Oprah, and others know about empire building that most people miss, check out the link in the description for a free bonus video.
What is it that you would like to have as your legacy, as you think
Well,
about
I'd like to be the oldest man that ever lived, actually. But no, I like teaching. And so if I've been a decent teacher, and I have a lot of university students come out every year.
And today, is there anything on your bucket list that you would like to do that you haven't done?
I'd have done it. If there's anything I wanted to do, I'd do it. Money has no utility to me. Time has utility to me. But money in terms of making trips or owning more houses or having a boat or something. It has no utility to me whatsoever.
So-
It has a lot of utility to other people, which is the reason for the Giving Pledge.
What motivates you to still run a company when most people your age are playing shuffleboard or they're relaxing or doing something?
Yeah, they spend all week planning their haircut usually. I get to do every day what I love with people that I love. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
And so the greatest pleasure in your life, other than doing interviews like this, is what? Looking at new companies, making investments, giving away the money. What gives you the most pleasure? Your grandchildren?
It's all of the above. I mean, but the truth is that I regard Berkshire Hathaway sort of like somebody that a painter regards a painting. The difference being that the canvas is unlimited. So there's no finish line at Berkshire, and it's a game that you can continue to play.
Any word of advice you give to somebody who's a young investor who would like to emulate you, what you would recommend that they do to kind of build something close to what you've done?
I think you should look for the job that you would want to hold if you didn't need a job. I mean, you're probably only going to live once. Shirley MacLaine may differ with that, or a few people, and you don't want to go sleepwalking through life. And you really, whether you make X or 120% of X, it really isn't remotely as important as to whether, in most cases, you marry the right person and you also find something that you would do if you didn't need the money. And I've had that job for 50 or more years, and I was lucky in that I sort of found early on what turned me on that way. But don't settle for something if you can possibly. Don't worry about making the most money this week or next month. I mean, when I offered to work for Ben Graham, I said I'll work for nothing, and I meant it. I mean, just the idea of being turned on. So look for the job that turns you on. Find a passion.
How can other people tap dance to work? What's the secret of that?
You find your passion. You find your passion. I was very, very lucky to find it, when I was 7 or 8 years old, and fortunately, my children have found their passion. One son loves farming like nothing else. One son loves music like everything else, and all three of them love philanthropy and what they get to do. You're lucky in life when you find it, and you can't guarantee you're going to find it in your first job out. But I always tell college students that come out, I say, take the job that you would take if you were independently wealthy. You're going to do well at it. If you think you're going to be a lot happier if you've got 2X instead of X, you're probably making a mistake. I mean, you ought to find something you like that works with that, and you'll get in trouble if you think that making 10X or 20X is the answer to everything in life, because then you will do things like borrow money when you shouldn't, or maybe cut corners on things that your employer wants you to cut corners on. Or it just doesn't make any sense. You won't like it when you look back on it. 3 things in hiring people: look for integrity, intelligence, and energy. And he said if that person didn't have the first 2, that the latter 2 would kill them. Because if they don't have integrity, you want them dumb and lazy. You don't want them smart and energetic. It never bothered me if people disagreed with what I thought, as long as I felt I knew the facts. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things I don't know a thing about. I just stay away from those. So I stay within what I call my circle of competence. Tom Watson said it best. He said, I'm no genius, but I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots. Well, I try and stay around those spots, and I just don't have a problem if somebody says, you're wrong on something. I go back and look at the facts, and I think that really is much more important, frankly, than having a few points of IQ or having an extra course or 2 in school or anything of the sort. You need emotional stability. I just read and read and read. I probably read 5 to 6 hours a day. I don't read as fast now as when I was younger, but I read 5 daily newspapers. I read a fair number of magazines. I read 10Ks. I read annual reports, and I read a lot of other things too. So I've always enjoyed reading. I love reading biographies. Famous lesson about a margin of safety, that you don't drive a truck that weighs 9,900 pounds across a bridge that says limit 10,000 pounds, because you can't be that sure about it. If you see something like that, you go down a little further down the road and you find one that says limit 20,000 pounds, and that's the one you drive across. The nature of capitalism is that people want to come in and take your castle. Perfectly understandable. I mean, if I'm selling television sets or something, there's going to be 10 other people that are going to try and sell a better television set. If I have a restaurant here in Omaha, people are going to try and copy my menu and give more parking and take my chef and so on. So capitalism's all about somebody coming and trying to take the castle. Now, what you need is a castle that has some durable competitive advantage, some castle that has a moat around it. And that moat, one of the best moats in many respects, is to be a low-cost producer. But sometimes the moat is just having more talent. I mean, if you're the heavyweight champion of the world and you keep knocking out people, you've got a competitive advantage as long as you can keep doing it. And it's very profitable if you're the one that happens to be able to do it. If you can turn out great motion pictures, I mean, Steven Spielberg, I mean, he's a fellow to bet on, and it has enormous economic value. You'd be surprised at my days. I mean, they're very unstructured, no meetings. None. I mean, I don't like meetings. And I read a lot. I wish I were a faster reader. I'd get more done. But I do read a lot, and I'm on the phone a moderate amount. Our businesses run themselves basically out there. My job is allocating capital, and that's what I'm thinking about. But I don't like to have things all packed hour to hour to hour. And Bill and I are both extraordinarily lucky. I mean, we really get to do what we like to do, the way we want to do it, with people that we choose to be around, and they're terrific. I mean, we've really got everything our way, and we're very fortunate. And in his world, he has a different kind of pace than I have, but we both love it the way we do it. And my guess is that we're each the most productive in that particular mode too, because it fits our personalities and aptitudes. What kills great businesses, if you look at, I do believe in looking at history, and I like to study failure, actually. And my partner says all I want to know is where I'll die, so I'll never go there. And we want to see what has caused businesses to go bad. And the biggest thing that kills them is complacency. I mean, you want a restlessness, a feeling that somebody's always after you, but you're going to stay ahead of them. You always want to be on the move. And when you've got a great business, like Coca-Cola, which is, there aren't any like Coca-Cola, but you really, the danger would always be that you rest on your laurels. But I see none of that, obviously, at Coca-Cola. But that is the key, to compete the same way when you've got 1.8 billion servings being sold daily as when you were selling 10 a day. And that restlessness, that belief that tomorrow is more exciting than today, you just have to have it permeate the organization.
Who was Ben Graham? He was your primary mentor, model?
He was a wonderful man, and he was my professor at Columbia. I read his book when I was 19 at the University of Nebraska, and I'd started investing when I was 11, and I started reading about it when I was like 7. So I'd gone through I read every book in the Omaha Public Library that there was by the time I was 12 on investing and stock market. And I had a lot of fun, but I never really found out, I never got grounded in anything. And it was entertaining, but it wasn't going to be profitable. And then I read Graham's book, The Intelligent Investor, when I was at the University of Nebraska. And that just opened the whole thing up to me. Yeah, and I named my oldest son is named Howard after my dad, Graham Buffett, and he was a marvelous man. Never expected anything from me in return. Ben Graham, in his low teens, looked around and he looked at the people he admired, and he said, I want to be admired, so why don't I just behave like them? And he found there was nothing impossible about behaving like them. And similarly, he did the same thing on the reverse side in terms of getting rid of those qualities.
You have given a lot of fabulous advice, but what's the best advice that you've ever received?
Well, I received it in a variety of forms, particularly from my father when I was very young. But I mean, he basically, I think, taught me how to live. Not that I did it perfectly or anything like that, but I mean, he was giving me lessons, but he wasn't doing it by preaching to me. He was doing it by example. But basically, well, the biggest lesson, in a sense, I got is the power of unconditional love. I mean, I think there is no power on earth like unconditional love. And I think that if you offer that to your child, I mean, you're 90% of the way home. And there may be days when you don't feel like it. It's not uncritical love. That's a different animal. But to know you always can come back. I mean, that is huge in life. That takes you a long, long way. And I would say that every parent out there that can extend that to their child at a very young age, it's going to make for a better human being.
And you felt like you got that kind of unconditional love from your dad?
I absolutely did, yeah.
That is a powerful thing.
It is. Testing, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, that's working, okay.
I'd like to talk to you about your financial future, and I hope those figures become applicable to all of you as we go along. And I'd like to start by posing a problem for you. And incidentally, I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes, and we'll do Q&A, because what we want to do is talk about what's on your mind. But I'd like you to think about this for just a second. If, as we walked out of here today, I said I would like to buy 10% of your financial future, I was going to write you a check today, and from this day forth, you were going to give me 10% of everything you earned. How much would you want to charge me for that? I'm going to buy 1/10 of you. And I may take the low bid, incidentally, so be careful what you write down. Well, I think if you thought about that a little while, you can contemplate that for a few minutes. You know, you're going to get a check from me today, and you can do anything you want with the money, but from this day forth, you have to give me 10% of what you earn. I think it would be very foolish of you, any of you, if you asked for less than, say, $50,000. Now, it's going to be a few years before you're out earning money, and so I've got a few years of dead money there. But then I would start getting this royalty on you as you went along. So I really think that if you thought about it, most of you would want a fair amount more than that, and I think you'd be right. Fortunately, I didn't make this deal with anybody when I started out, so nobody's got a 10% royalty on me. But I think that $50,000 would sort of be the absolute minimum. And if you think about that, that means that right today, you are worth $500,000, because if 10% of you is worth $50,000 in cash today, your potential is worth a minimum on a 100% basis of $500,000. That is the big financial asset you've got. It's way more important what you do with that $500,000 asset that you own today than whether you decide to buy stocks or bonds, or whether you put your money in a mutual fund or pick your own stocks or anything of that sort. The biggest financial asset that you have going for you by miles is the value of your own earning power over the years. So that's really what you should focus on. If you're focusing on your financial future, that means you should focus on you. Because whether your 10% is worth $50,000 or $100,000 or $300,000, which would be $500,000 or $1 million or $3 million for all of you, whether it turns out to be one or the other is really dependent in a very large part on what you do in the next few years. All of you in this room have the brains to do extremely well in life. You've all got the energy to do extremely well in life, and then the question is, how do you apply it? If you've got a 200 horsepower motor, do you get 200 horsepower out of it? Do you get your full potential, or do you get 100 horsepower or 50 horsepower? Now, there's two things that can hold you back in getting the full horsepower out of your engine, whatever it may be. All of you have big enough engines. And one of those is a lack of education, but that probably isn't going to happen to very many people in this room. If you did have a lack of education, if you didn't have a chance to get a decent education in life, it wouldn't make any difference what that potential was, because you'd never unlock it. But the second most important thing, and equally as important, is in terms of the habits that you develop, in terms of what you do with yourself. When we hire people, we look for three qualities. We look for integrity, we look for intelligence, and we look for energy. But if they don't have the first one, integrity, the other two will kill you. Because if you're hiring somebody without integrity, you really want them to be dumb and lazy, don't you? I mean, the last thing in the world you want for them is to be smart and energetic. So smart and energetic only goes with integrity. But the nice thing about, you make your own decision on that. You can't change your IQ or how far you can throw a football or how high you can jump or the color of your hair very easily. But you can elect to have integrity that matches anybody else's. And if you match that with intelligence, which you have, and energy, which you have, you will get an extraordinary result, and you'd be very foolish to sell me 10% of yourself for $50,000. On the other hand, if you don't match it with that, your potential will, in a significant part, go unused. And I'll give you a little simple test to apply in terms of thinking about the kind of habits you want to develop, because you can have any habits you want to be. You can be lazy, you can be prompt, you can be late, you can be honest, you can cut corners. I mean, you have all these choices. And those are choices for you to make. Nobody else is going to make them for you. And I would suggest that you play this little game with me, too. Think about the person you would most like to be in life. Maybe it's one of your contemporaries, maybe it's somebody a little older, but pick out the person you admire the most, the person that you'd change places with if you could. And then write down why you admire them. Just put it on a piece of paper. And then figure out the person that you would least like to change places with you. Who really turns you off? Who do you find repulsive? And list the reasons why that person turns you off so much. And put those down on the other side of the paper. And then look at that list. And you'll find that everything on the left-hand side, what you admire in other people, the qualities they bring to life, cheerfulness, generosity, all kinds of things. You'll find those are things you can do yourself. It's very simple. You got to apply yourself, but the habits you form in doing that early on will carry you through life. And on the other hand, you'll find that the things that make people repulsive, selfishness, obnoxiousness, all these things, egotism, are things that no one has to have. If you find those in yourself, you can get rid of them as long as you get rid of them early. So all I suggest is that you write down a list of what you admire, what you find contemptible, and decide that the ones on the admired side are ones you're going to acquire for yourself. And if you do that when you're young, it'll carry you through the rest of your life. This doesn't work if you do it when you're 50 or 60. By then the habits are too well formed. But if you do it early, behavior becomes a habit. So if you do that, 2 or 3 years from now, if you go through the same exercise, you'll find out that the person you admire the most is yourself. That can be a little dangerous under some circumstances, but it's not a bad thing. I mean, you want to be somebody you like, and you don't want to be somebody that you dislike. And form those habits early. You basically can't miss. Now, I'll give you one other small piece of advice that's just a corollary on this, and then we'll get to your questions. And that is, as a general matter, as a one piece of specific financial advice, I would say, avoid credit cards. Just forget about them. We're in various businesses that issue credit cards. The American public loves credit cards. But if you start revolving debt on credit cards, you're going to be paying 18 or 20%. And you can't make progress in your financial life going around borrowing money at 18 or 20%. You can make a lot of money by lending it out at 18 or 20% over time. If you can find anybody that's good that will borrow from you. But you don't want to be on the side of the equation that's always behind in life. I was lucky. I'd saved about $10,000 by the time I got out of school. That $10,000 was really worth millions I might have earned later on, because after you get a family and everything, the expenses roll in. But those were my tools to work with, but it was only because I was ahead of the game. If you're behind the game by $10,000 at some point and paying 18 or 20% interest on it, you will never, you'll never get out of it. So the trick, I've got a partner that says, all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there. And that's true in financial matters as well. You want to figure out where you don't want to be ahead of time and avoid that. And I get about a dozen letters a day from people who are having terrible problems. And there are two reasons why they have terrible problems. One is a number of them have had health problems of some sort. I mean, they have really been hit by or somebody in their family has been hit by some kind of catastrophic illness. And that is it's a terrible thing to happen to any family. And they run up bills they can't pay, and really only society can solve that one in terms of protecting people against that. That's just plain bad luck. But the other one is from people who run up credit card debt, and they're facing bankruptcy, or they've been through bankruptcy once before, and they owe a whole bunch of money, and they can't even pay the interest, let alone pay any principal. And half of my letters come from people like that, and that problem is avoidable. Catastrophic illness is not, but credit card debt is something you bring on yourself, and it's way better, it's way easier to stay out of trouble than to get out of trouble financially. And I will guarantee you, if you run up big credit card debt, you will be in trouble probably the rest of your life in terms of your financial situation. On the other hand, if you get ahead of the game, even it's on a very modest scale, so that money is coming in from investing, and people owe you money or equities owe you ownership, you'll be way ahead of the game compared to paying it, paying your creditors every month. So my advice to you is, if you can't pay for it, don't buy it, and get yourself in a position where you can pay for anything, and then we'll be glad to see you at Borsheim's or the Nebraska Furniture Mart.
When you look at the future, there's also the argument made that this is something that goes with your philosophy today. Get out of cash and get into assets, because we don't know what's going to happen to the dollar.
Well, cash is always a bad investment. I mean, when people said cash is king a year ago, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, cash wasn't producing anything, and it was sure to go down in value over time. And then you always want to be sure you have enough. I mean, it's like oxygen. You want to be sure it's around, but you don't need to have excessive amounts of it around. And cash, we will always have enough cash around. But anytime we have surplus cash around, I'm unhappy. I mean, I would much rather have good businesses than cash. And we found a chance in the last year or thereabouts to deploy. We came in with something over $40 billion in cash, and we've got about $20 billion now, and we've had some earnings. So we put a lot of cash to work, and I like that. No, I'd much rather own a good business than have cash.
And it is a hedge against the dollar?
Well, you can say all assets are a hedge against the dollar. I mean, but all you know is that the dollar is going to be worth less 10, 20, 30 years from now. I say worth less, not worthless. Right. You want to watch that. But it will be, and that's true of almost every currency that I can think of. The question is how much it depreciates in value. But cash is not a place to that.
Now, why is that?
Well,
because the dollar is going to be worth less.
Because we'll print more of them in relation to the amount of goods that are moving. If we dropped $1 million of cash into every household in the United States today, everybody would feel very good, except the people that invested in things that were denominated in dollars. And,
Exactly.
There will be no tendency toward deflation in this country over time, or in virtually any country.
Tendency toward inflation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
To make $10 a week more doing something that you don't feel good about compared to something you'd feel good about, make the change. You can't say I'm going to suddenly become a terribly attractive person when I'm 60. It just doesn't work that way. So pick up the right habits now. The test isn't whether you get the greatest business idea in the world the first time out. The test is whether you keep learning as you go along what your strengths are.
What's up, Believe Nation? It's Evan. My one word is believe, and I believe in you. I believe you have an amazing gift inside you that I want to see explode out onto the world. Now, I started the Mentor Me series to try to hang around people who've done a lot more than us, who've accomplished great things, and hopefully by spending a little more time with them, some of their mindsets, their beliefs, their way of thinking seeps into us to help us become the best version of ourselves. So today we're going to learn from one of the best, Warren Buffett, and 5 simple yet powerful pieces of his advice. Mentor me, Warren. All right, let's kick it off with number 1. Be determined to succeed.
I would like to tell you of 2 women that each sold a business to Berkshire Hathaway, to me actually, for many, many, many millions of dollars. Both of them started with $2,500. By a coincidence, it was the exact same amount. It was everything they had in the world. And one of them was a woman who landed in Seattle in 1917, couldn't speak a word of English, had a tag around her neck. The tag said, Fort Dodge, Iowa. The Red Cross got her to Fort Dodge, where she was reunited with her husband, who had come to the country a couple of years earlier. And she lived in Fort Dodge for 2 years, and as she put it, she felt like a dummy. She couldn't pick up the language. She couldn't learn a word. And so she and her husband decided to move to Omaha. So they came to Omaha in 1919, and there she found a small colony of Russian Jews, so she started feeling more at home. And then as her oldest daughter went to school, she would come home, this daughter, Frances, and she would teach her mother the words she'd learned in school that day. And this woman, Rose Blumkin, spent 20 years saving money, bringing first her siblings over, her mother and father, $50 at a time. She sold used clothing to do it. She had 4 children during this period. And by 1937, after 20 years, she'd saved $2,500. She went to Chicago and she bought what she could of furniture. Her dream had always been to open a furniture store. And this woman who had never gone to school one day in her life, with $2,500, but with the same spirit that the people in this room had about having a dream and working to accomplish that dream, she built a business which she sold to me in 1983 for $60 million approximately, and which did $1.5 billion worth of business last year. The 4th generation is working in that business. This woman, Rose Blumkin, lived, well, she worked for me until she was 103. And then then she retired and she died the next year, which is a lesson to all of Berkshire's managers that premature retirement, you can't tell what's going to happen. But Mrs. B, with her $2,500, one further fact about her, she could not read or write. And she went into a furniture business, and she didn't bring anything in unique in furniture, but she brought a determination to succeed. She knew she could outwork anyone else. She knew that she cared about her customers. She worked at very low gross margins, but she built this incredible business.
Number 2, try to find your passion.
Last week, 160 of them from Harvard and South Dakota State. I just tell them, try to find your passion. And, may not find it the first time, but, don't sleepwalk through life. Find something that you really enjoy doing if you can do it. And, not everybody's lucky enough to be able to find that, but it ought to be your goal. To make $10 a week more doing something that you don't feel good about compared to something you'd feel good about, make the change.
Bill said something that I thought was really interesting. He said, the thing you do obsessively between age 13 and 18, that's the thing you have the most chance of being world class at.
Yeah.
Bill said his one thing was coding. What was your one obsessive thing?
I was pretty interested in investments. No, Bill and I, his father, many years ago, right after we met, had a group of about 20 write down on a sheet of paper one word that they thought accounted for their success. And Bill and I, who may have only met twice, didn't know what the other one was writing down. We both wrote down the same word, which was focus. And he was focused on software, I was focused on investments. And it gave me a big advantage to start very young. There's no question about it.
Number 3, be the person you want to be.
If you look around you at the people you admire, they have certain qualities. I mean, you've got friends. Why do you like them? Generally, generally they have an upbeat attitude on life. Generally, they're generous people. They're humorous people. They're people that do more than their share. They're people that are thinking about something nice they can do for you. And all of those qualities attract you. And none of those are innate at birth. I mean, you can acquire those. And then there's other people that turn you off, and they have habits. They take credit for things they didn't do. They don't show up on time, whatever it may be. They're a little dishonest about things. And if you're looking at your life at a young age like you are, and you can choose what kind of a person you can be, why not be the person you admire rather than the person you can't stand? It's so simple. So just write down the qualities you like. Take your 5 best friends. Why do you like them? And just write down those qualities. And you will find there's no quality there that you can't have yourself. And similarly with the 5 people you can't stand to be around, put those things down that turn you off about those people. And if they turn you off about them, why should you possess them? It's so simple. It's not like something complicated that you think you should be learning with an advanced degree in school.
It's not as complicated as investing in the stock market.
No, but it's enormously important to have people work with you in life. They're going to work with you in life if they like you. You know, and they may occasionally, I mean, if you're in the Army or something, you know, you may work for somebody that you don't like. But by and large, you're going to get the best out of people if they feel good about you. And it's just so easy, but you've got to develop the habits early, because you can't say I'm going to suddenly become a terribly attractive person when I'm 60. It just doesn't work that way. So pick up the right habits now. And I will guarantee you, if you actually just write down those qualities and think about it, you will find you can have every one of the attractive qualities, get rid of the ones that are negative, and your life will be different.
Number 4, delight customers.
Henry Ford, as you may know, failed twice before he started the Ford Motor Company in 1903. I mean, the test isn't whether you get the greatest business idea in the world the first time out. The test is whether you keep learning as you go along what your strengths are and what you can do for your customers, what you can bring especially to the party. And to do that, you need a genuine desire day in, day out to delight the customer. I've never seen a business, and I've seen a lot of businesses, but I've never seen one that delights the customer that doesn't succeed. I mean, what you want is that customer the next day when they think, do I want to rent a car or do I want to buy some furniture? What goes through their mind? You know, it's the place where they've had a great experience. I don't know what I paid for this tie. Actually, probably if somebody gave it to me, but for the purposes of this speech, I will say I have no idea. But or the shirt I'm wearing, or this. But I do know, I will remember how I was treated when I bought it. I mean, you long forget about the price, but you never forget whether you had a good experience or a poor experience with the purchase experience.
And number 5, the last one before a very special bonus clip, is read.
I should mention one thing about reading. It was at the library here at Columbia that I wish I spent probably more time than any other student. I lived there practically. But you know, I pulled a book out there, happened to be Who's Who in America, and it told me something about my professor, Benjamin Graham, and then I looked up and I went to the library and I said, I want to learn more about this because I learned this over here. That changed my whole life. You know, we own Geico now because of that librarian directing me to some other book and then following through on that. It's the chance. I read about 1/5 the pace that Bill does, but I still spend 5 or 6 hours a day reading. I mean, it just, you can learn so much. I particularly love biography. Just you know, to be able to live the lives of these people that have been so extraordinary, the lessons and the discouragements they face, just everything about it. So you can't get enough of reading.
Now I've got a very special Warren Buffett bonus clip around how anything can happen in this world that I think you're really going to enjoy. But before that, my question of the day is, I want to know, what did you learn today? What did you learn from Warren that you are going to apply somehow to your life or to your business? Leave in the comments below. I'm really curious to find out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I believe in you. I hope you continue to believe in yourself and whatever your one word is. Much love. I'll see you soon, and enjoy the bonus clip.
He is the only person who has ever, from scratch, built a company that is in the top 10 of the Fortune 500.
Well, Berkshire is a holding company of sorts. It owns a large number of separate businesses that operate independently of each other and to a great extent from the parent company, Berkshire Hathaway.
Well, gold's been red hot. My favorite green gold. So strong. All right. Well, we're going to get more from you in a second.
We have maybe 70, maybe 80 businesses, and we ask them to behave in a way that doesn't hurt our reputation at Berkshire Hathaway, but they run their own lives. Other people do most of the decorating of the office, so various things come in. Originally, when I moved in 1962, you can see this. I went down to the South Omaha Library. And I think for $1, I got 7 copies of old New York Times from big times like the Panic of 1907. This is one, 1929, obviously. But I wanted to put on the walls days of extreme panic in Wall Street, just as a reminder that anything can happen in this world. I mean, it's instructive art, you can call it.
So let me give you the one-word secret to happiness. One word. This is all you need to be happy.
It's the most important word ever.
If you had to think of one word that's most important to you or that sums you up or that would be kind of like a little beacon.
Hey, Believe Nation, if you want to know what the most important one word is for Tony Robbins, Gary Vaynerchuk, Oprah Winfrey, will.i.am, and Howard Schultz, I have a very special secret video for you. Check the description for details.
So, but the habits you develop, and I go back, the other thing is have the right heroes. I mean, I've always been lucky in that respect. And if the people you look up to are going to form your vision of what the world, how you want to be in later life. And I'll give you 2 pieces of advice. I'd invest as much in myself as you can. I mean, you're your own biggest asset by far. I mean, you've got all kinds of potential. All the people in this room, you're lucky to be in this country, gotten a good education. But most people go through life using up a very, very small part of their potential. And so anything you do that invests in yourself, that's the best investment you can possibly make. And then I would follow my passion. I mean, whatever turns you on. I was lucky. I found something early that turned me on. But you don't want to take a job just for the money. You don't want to take a job for an organization that you really don't feel good about, or work for people that you don't feel good about. You really want to be excited when you get out of bed every morning. And it won't necessarily be the job that you have 10 years later, but you'll be learning so much as you go along. And I took a job with Ben Graham, my hero, and I never asked the salary, and I found at the end of the month when I got my first paycheck what I was earning, because I just knew it was the right thing to be doing. So I would follow your passion. The worst investment I ever made? How long do you have? Well, I've made some very bad ones, but that doesn't really bother me. It may bother the shareholders, but that's another question. You're going to make mistakes in life. I mean, there's no question about it. You don't want to make them on the big decisions, who you marry and some things like that. So there's no way I'm going to make a lot of business and investment decisions without making some mistakes. I may try to minimize them. I don't dwell on them at all. I don't look back. The biggest mistakes are the ones that actually don't show up. They're the mistakes of omission rather than commission. We've never lost that much money on any one investment, but it's the things that I knew enough to do that I didn't do. We have missed profits of as much as maybe $10 billion in things that I knew enough to do and I didn't do. Now, the fact I didn't buy Microsoft way back is not a foregone opportunity, because I didn't know enough to make that decision. But there have been other investments where I didn't know enough to make the decision, and for one reason or another, I either didn't do it at all or I did it on a small scale. I was sucking my thumb when I should have been writing checks, basically. And those don't show up. There's no place where it shows missed opportunities, but I've missed some big ones. The triumphs in life are partly triumphs because you know that everything isn't going to be a triumph. And I would never get too hung up on mistakes. I know a lot of people that really agonize over them, and it just isn't worth it. I mean, tomorrow's another day, and you live it forward and just go on to the next thing.
My name is Sheena Cho from the Academy of Finance. What recommendations would you give us as teenagers to prepare for our future and become as successful as you?
Well, if you're interested in business, I definitely think you ought to learn all the accounting you can by the time you're in your early 20s. Accounting is the language of business. Now, that doesn't mean it's a perfect language, so you have to know the limitations of that language.
as well as all aspects of it. So I would advise you to learn accounting, and I would advise you to be, in terms of part-time employment or anything else, work at a number of businesses. There's nothing like seeing how business operates to build your judgment in the future about businesses. When you understand what kind of things are very competitive and what kind of things are less competitive and why that works that way, all of that adds to your knowledge. So I would do a lot of reading. If you're interested in investments, I would take the accounting courses. I do a lot of reading about investments, and I would get as much business experience. I would talk business with people that are in business to find out what they think makes their operation tick, or where they have problems and why. I just think you just kind of sop it up every place that you can, and if it turns you on, you'll do well in it. I mean, I think that if it there certain activities grab different people, but if business is of interest to you, my guess is you'll do well. And if you understand business, you understand investments. Investments are simply business decisions that in terms of capital allocation. I wish you well on it. Charlie?
Yeah, there's also the little matter of underspending your income year after year after year.
Which we have mastered.
Yes. That really works if you keep at it.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie and I both. Charlie started having children at a rapid rate, so he was a lawyer when there was not big money, and then, but I was any money you save before you get out and start having a family is probably worth any dollar is probably worth $10 later on, simply because you can save it. It's the time to save is young, and you'll never have a better time to save than really pre-formation of a family, because the expenditures come along then, whether you like them or not. So work for yourself first and put the money aside. I was lucky that way. I didn't have to pay for my own college. Probably wouldn't have gone to college if I'd had to pay for it. But I was able to save everything I made in my teens, and those dollars got magnified quite a bit. Whereas the money when I started first selling securities, I mean the money I made then was taken up by family needs to quite an extent. So start saving early. A lot of it's habit anyway, so it's a great habit to have. Okay, zone one, please.
I think it's the same thing that makes most sense practically all of the time, and that is to consistently buy an S&P 500 low-cost index fund. Keep buying it through thick and thin, and especially through thin, because the temptation gets, when you see bad headlines in newspapers, maybe to say, well, maybe I should skip a year or something. Just keep buying it. American business is going to do fine over time. So you know the investment universe is going to do very well. The Dow Jones Industrial Average went from 66 to 11,497 in 1 century, and then since that century has ended, it's more or less doubled again. American business is going to do well. The trick is not to pick the right company; it's to be, because most people aren't equipped to do that, and plenty of times I make mistakes on that. The trick is to essentially buy all the big companies through the S&P 500, and to do it consistently, and to do it in a very, very low-cost way, because costs really matter in investments. If returns are going to be 7 or 8%, and you are paying 1% for fees, that makes an enormous difference in how much money you have on retirement.
At the annual meeting for Berkshire Hathaway this year, you introduced a special guest to the audience of 40,000 shareholders who were watching. It was Jack Bogle. Why did you want to recognize Jack Bogle?
I think Jack Bogle has done more for American investors than any other person connected with Wall Street or the investment process, because he, with a number of other people, he came up with the idea of the index fund. He wasn't the sole thinker behind it, but he was the guy that implemented it and crusaded for it. But now there's trillions of dollars in low-cost index funds. Those people are going to have better lives. They're going to have better retirements. Their kids are going to inherit more money because of Jack Bogle and his efforts.
11 billionaires who are models of frugality. If you had billions of dollars, what would you do? Would you travel on a private jet and visit the top vacation spots in the world? Are you going to buy the fashionable clothes you've always dreamed of? Will you move into a $1 million mansion and own numerous luxury cars? So much money to spend! However, this is the opposite of what happens in reality. You'll surely get the shock of your life when Brightside gives you a peek into the lives of the world's richest of the rich, who are surprising models of frugality. Before we reveal these billionaires, hit the subscribe button and turn on the little notification bell. Now you'll always be the first to see our new fun and interesting videos on the bright side of life. Let's start the countdown. Number 11. Charles Ergen. Charles Ergen is worth about $10.8 billion. He is a self-made billionaire who started his business empire by selling C-band satellite dishes from the back of a truck in 1980. That business is now Dish Network, and he is the chairman and co-founder. Ergen is also the chairman of EchoStar, a leading worldwide provider of satellite communication solutions. Ergen is a total control freak and runs his business with an iron fist. According to BusinessInsider.com, Ergen is known to publicly berate executives to ensure the company's goals are met. He also requires and ensures that his employees clock in with fingerprint scanners. Ergen prefers a lunch of sandwiches in a brown paper bag over 5-star restaurant dishes. On his business travels, he shares rooms with his colleagues and never flies first class. Number 10. Carlos Slim Helú. Meet Mexico's richest man, Carlos Slim Helú, with an amassed wealth of over $64 billion. He currently owns more than 200 companies and has stakes in construction, retail, mining, and real estate companies. He also owns 17% of the New York Times. Carlos built his conglomerate, known as Slimlandia, by buying and investing in Mexican companies during the country's debt crisis in 1982. He buys multi-million-dollar mansions, but Carlos is settled in the same 6-bedroom house he's owned for more than 40 years. The self-made billionaire doesn't have high-end tailored suits, preferring to buy most of his clothes from one of his retail outlets. The telecoms tycoon is tech-savvy himself, but he also prefers good old-fashioned pen and paper over a computer. In fact, he asks his advisors to write down their briefings on one sheet of paper. Number 9. Jim Walton. Jim Walton is the youngest son of Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, the world's largest retailer. This man has a company that earns $500 billion from its 12,000 stores worldwide, runs a bank with assets of more than $16 billion, has a net worth of around $43 billion, and can get anything he wants with a snap of his fingers. Jim operates the family business from the upstairs floor of a plain old brick building in Bentonville, Arkansas. His home is also located near his office, where the first Walmart store opened in 1970. Jim is hands-on with all the dealings of the family's companies, just like his father. According to former Walmart CEO David Glass, Jim wants to get things done and always puts in very long hours. Number 8. John Caldwell. The now retired co-founder of the United Kingdom's largest mobile phone distributor, Phones 4u, has a personal net worth of $2.4 billion. Phones 4u wasn't that successful in its first 2 years. However, the company made a breakthrough in 1991 because of John's entrepreneurial spirit. When John sold the company in 2006, it was reportedly selling 26 phones a minute. He is still involved in various property, aviation, and wealth management businesses, but his primary focus is his philanthropic deeds. John is one of the signatories to the Giving Pledge, and he is committed to giving over half of his wealth to charitable causes. This is in addition to his own foundations, Caldwell Children and Caldwell Lime Co. Charity. Before his retirement, John rode his bike 14 miles to and from work every day. He told Forbes magazine that he doesn't need Savile Row suits and prefers to buy from the British retailer Marks & Spencer. John doesn't have a taste for expensive wines, and he even cuts his own hair. Number 7. Amancio Ortega. One of the richest men in Europe also holds the title of the wealthiest retailer in the world. It is none other than Amancio Ortega, the owner of the European fashion chain Zara. This brand is one of the subsidiaries of Inditex, a company he co-founded with his ex-wife, Rosalia Mera, in 1975. In 2017, he surpassed Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos by being the richest man in the world, but he fell to the third spot within 48 hours of it being announced. Nonetheless, Ortega and his fortune are worth over $68 billion. He is also a self-made billionaire who dropped out of school. The multi-billionaire is more often seen on the factory floor checking new products with his designers than cooped up inside a spacious private office. Ortega is never seen wearing his own brand, Zara, preferring a plain uniform of a blue blazer, white shirt, and gray pants. He lives in a discreet apartment building with his second wife, Flora, in the same small Spanish town where he grew up. Number 6. David Sheraton. If you study computer engineering at Stanford, you've probably met the billionaire professor, David Sheraton. His net worth is over $6 billion, and he initially made his fortune by being one of the very first investors in Google. He is not only a tech-savvy professor, but also a shrewd businessman. Sheraton cuts his own hair, flies economy class, and has lived in the same home for over 35 years. He's splurged twice in his lifetime. The first time was when he bought a 2012 Honda Odyssey. The second was when he took a vacation to Maui to windsurf. After that, he considered himself spoiled and was upset because of the money he'd spent. When he dines in an expensive restaurant, he saves half of each meal for the next day. And he claims that he reuses tea bags. Whoa! Number 5. Azim Premji. One of his employees anonymously said that Azim Premji makes Uncle Scrooge look like Santa Claus. Premji owns the third largest information technology and outsourcing company in India. He did the unthinkable when he took the reins of Wipro Limited from his father and transformed the family's cooking oil business into a software and outsourcing company. Now, his net worth is over $17 billion. Amazing, huh? But what's even more amazing is his insane spending habits. He prefers to fly coach and drives an old Toyota Corolla. The czar of Indian IT monitors how many toilet paper rolls are used by his employees and reminds them to turn off the lights before leaving the office. He is also known to give away tens of millions of dollars to charities. Number 4. Mark Zuckerberg. Even if Facebook lost almost $17 billion and he was grilled by Congress, Mark's net worth is over $68 billion. Plus, he's still included in the Forbes and Bloomberg lists of the world's top 10 billionaires. Zuckerberg drives a $30,000 manual transmission Volkswagen, and he's content with a uniform of a t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers. In 2011, he splurged a little when he bought a $7 million house in Palo Alto. In the backyard of that house, he married his longtime girlfriend, Priscilla Chan. Mark and his wife announced in 2015 that they would donate 99% of their Facebook shares. Zuckerberg is also a philanthropist and contributes billions of dollars to charitable causes. Number 3. Warren Buffett. The Oracle of Omaha has a net worth of over $85 billion. He is one of the most successful investors in the world, yet he does everything to live below his means. Buffett is the current chairman and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, which is a collection of around 60 companies including Geico, Duracell, and Dairy Queen. Despite his staggering wealth, Buffett prefers a simple and frugal life. He still lives in the same 6,000 square foot 5-bedroom house he bought for $31,500 in 1958 in Omaha, Nebraska. Instead of dining in 5-star restaurants, Buffett buys a cheap breakfast at McDonald's. He is also committed to giving away 99% of his wealth to charity, and he launched the Giving Pledge with Bill Gates in 2010. Number 2. Bill Gates. Gates' net worth is around $95 billion, and he is ranked as the second richest man in the world. Gates is a computer genius and savvy entrepreneur. Although he is no longer the CEO and chairman of Microsoft, Gates remains a board member. Today, he is more drawn to his own charity, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. His friend Buffett doesn't own a $10 wristwatch like Gates does, but he has similar views on fast food joints. In fact, they shared a bite at Hong Kong McDonald's, and he recalled that Buffett paid for the meal with coupons. But now the business moguls won't have to collect coupons because they're the proud owners of McGold cards, granting them free McDonald's food for life. Priceless. Number 1. Jeff Bezos. With a net worth of over $157 billion, Bezos is the founder and CEO of Amazon.com Incorporated, the owner of the Washington Post, and the owner of an aerospace company called Blue Origin. He was one of the pioneers of e-commerce when he started Amazon.com in his own garage. Bezos initially sold books online, later expanding to a wide range of products and services. In terms of frugality, Bezos flaunts it to the world. He isn't a member of the Giving Pledge, but he donates to other foundations like the nonprofit TheDream.us. Reportedly, he drives a Honda Accord, and his desk at Amazon is made from a wooden door. Which frugal billionaire inspired you the most? Tell us in the comments. Don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with your friends.
Nice wheels.
Yeah. Well,
So how old is this caddy?
I think it's about 5 years or so.
You'd think the third richest man in the world might have his own chauffeur, but not Warren Buffett. He prefers being in the driver's seat.
Do any of your billionaire friends ever joke with you about the Cadillac and that you're driving and not something flashier?
No, they know me pretty well.
On a cold winter morning, Buffett chauffeured me around his hometown of Omaha, Nebraska, pointing out all the hot spots.
This is the McDonald's I go to frequently.
So what do you have at McDonald's?
Probably 3 times out of 4 I get a sausage McMuffin, but then at lunchtime I get a quarter pounder and fries.
A modest meal for a man worth some $46 billion. His humble tastes have humble origins.
Yeah, well, that is true. It was a Sears Roebuck house, and in those days they called it Sears Roebuck, not Sears.
Buffett took us to his childhood home.
My dad bought it in 1925. He bought it about 2 weeks before he was going to get married. He paid $55 a month on his mortgage.
55
a month.
A month.
Yeah, on the mortgage.
Buffett since moved, but says his new home is no palace either.
I could buy any house in the world, and I don't want any other house than the one I'm in. You know, and that house is in a middle-class neighborhood. I'm happy in a pair of khakis and a sweater, so I don't need fancy clothes. I don't need fancy food.
Do you have an iPad?
I do not have an iPad.
iPhone?
No.
He prefers books and reads avidly. Even as a boy, Buffett, whose father started a small stock brokerage, devoured anything he could find on money.
I bought my first stock when I was 11.
Which is incredible. That at 11 years old, you were buying your first stock.
Well, I would have bought it sooner, but I didn't have the money. It took me about 5 years to save $120.
That was in 1941.
Oh, there I am down at the bottom here.
There you are in this
I'm
corner.
over here, and that's Bob Russell and Rich
You
Olson.
kind of have like a little bit of a grin on your face.
I must have been thinking about investments at the time.
Warren Buffett, now 82, has vowed to give his money away to charity.
So this is you.
Well, this is me and my classmates.
It's a fortune he's been building since his days here at Rose Hill Elementary School.
When you were sitting here at Rose Hill Elementary, did you think at that point, I want to be the richest man in the world someday?
No, but I thought I wanted to be rich.
What appealed to you about being rich?
Well, I like to be independent. I want to be able to do what I want to do every day, and money lets you do that.
Fortune magazine writer Carol Loomis is a close friend. She's been covering Buffett's career for 46 years. Tap Dancing to Work is a collection of her articles about him.
What would you say is his biggest strength?
Well, his biggest strength, without doubt, is his rationality that he brings to business and investing. And this is a trait, rationality, that you would think many investors would bring to their work. But the fact is, most of them are swept up by emotions most of the time at some crucial time. And he never does that.
If you had invested $1,000 in Buffett's company in, say, April of 1966, your holdings today would be worth $6.5 million.
What role has luck played in your success?
Well, there's luck enters into everybody's life.
And Buffett says that begins at birth.
The womb from which you emerge determines your fate to an enormous degree for most of the 7 billion people in the world. Just in my own case, I was born in 1930. I had 2 sisters that have every bit the intelligence I have, every bit the drive, but they didn't have the same opportunities.
Because you were a man.
And I was white. So if I'd been black, my future would have been entirely different. If I'd been a female, my life would have been entirely different.
Buffett is just as outspoken about economic inequality. In a 2011 New York Times editorial, he wrote, "While the poor and middle class fight for us in Afghanistan, and while most Americans struggle to make ends meet, we mega-rich continue to get our extraordinary tax breaks."
I would say that in a country with $50,000 of GDP per person, that nobody should be hungry, nobody should lack a good education, nobody should be worried about medical care, nobody should be worried about their old age. And that doesn't mean looking for inequality of results. I mean, you want great inequality results. You want the Steve Jobses to be working in those garages, or the Dave Packards, or Bill Gates, or you name it. But you do not want anybody going to bed hungry or having medical care denied to them, or just the basics of life.
What about our debt? $16.4 trillion.
It's a lower percentage as a percentage of GDP than it was when we came out of World War II. You've got to think of it in relation to GDP. It is not a good thing to have it going up in relation to GDP. That should be stabilized. But the debt itself is not a problem.
So what's the biggest problem facing President Obama in his second term?
I would say Congress. But we look at Washington and you get discouraged. But I will tell you what is right about America just totally dwarfs what's wrong about Washington. 535 people are not going to mess up 315 million over time.
You believe that?
Oh, I know it, yeah.
To see the future, Buffett says all we need to do is remember our past.
If you really want to know the wonder of America, look about you and then, take it back in time 200 years and it wasn't there. So what's happened? We've had a system that's released the potential of human beings, but we will have hiccups along the way. And we had a big hiccup when the housing bubble burst in 2008. But the Dow Jones average in the 20th century went from 66 to 11,497. We went through the Great Depression, world wars, all kinds of things. And this country just keeps chugging forward.
It's hard to walk away from Warren Buffett without feeling optimistic. It's even harder to sit across from him without wondering, do you have any stock tips for me?
Well, just between you.
Yes, it'll be our little secret.
Yeah.
But it's no secret that Buffett puts his money in stocks.
The average person will not know enough to know which stocks to buy. They won't know enough to know when to buy them, but they don't have to, because if they can buy all of America through an index fund. And then they just have to be sure they don't jump in at exactly the wrong time. And they won't know what's exactly the wrong time. So therefore, they should put their money in over a period of time. And they'll have some periods that are wonderful and some that weren't so good. But overall, they will do fine over time.
Warren Buffett has done better than fine. In fact, he's done well enough to have no regrets.
It would be churlish for anybody with all the good luck I've had in life and to look back and say, that this could have been better, that could have been better. It's been wonderful.
Do you look back?
Not much. I think it's a big mistake to look back.
Written by the founder of Vanguard, John Bogle, the little book on common sense investing explains the benefits of investing in index funds instead of actively managed mutual funds. Copyrighted in 2007, it contains timeless common sense approaches to guarantee your fair share of stock market returns, instead of speculating on receiving high returns from actively managed mutual funds that usually come at a premium. Simply put, the winning strategy is to own all the nation's publicly held businesses at very low cost. By doing so, you are guaranteed to capture almost the entire return that they generate in the form of dividends and earnings growth. Trying to beat the market is a loser's game, according to John Bogle. So why are index funds so much better than actively managed mutual funds, and why did John Bogle base his entire career on them? If you enjoy videos about money, personal finance and investing, all topics that will help you better your financial future, consider subscribing to the channel and hit the notification icon to be notified of new videos. If this video is helpful, make sure to hit the like button. Lower costs typically mean higher returns. According to Warren Buffett, returns tend to decrease as motion or trading increases, never mind the expenses incurred. If more movement in a fund means diminishing returns, why pay so-called experts a premium to manage your money? Keep in mind that the companies employing highly paid managers to take control of your money and actively manage it must earn a paycheck. The money they're being paid is coming out of your pocket in the form of fees. Individuals who are supposed to be earning money for you are actually costing you money. Of course, there are some successful actively managed funds that outperform the market, but they're usually difficult to find and the performance has to be weighed with the expenses. Successful investing is about owning businesses and enjoying dividend payments and capital appreciation when the companies grow and earn money. Actively managed mutual funds are horrible from a tax perspective when compared to the average index fund, which is something many people don't think of when comparing the two. This is because the stocks within the mutual fund are purchased and sold throughout the year, and taxes must be paid on any gains. Index funds that have fixed investments don't buy and sell throughout the year, requiring investors to pay tax. The less active management involved within a fund, the better for investors in terms of taxes. Index funds require just enough management to match the index, so they rarely have to pay taxes the way an actively managed mutual fund does. Over a 35-year period, less than 1% of funds were able to beat the market by more than 2%, which is a small amount. If you have only a 1% chance of beating the market by any noticeable amount, is it really a wise choice to bet on those odds? You probably have a better chance of beating the market using a dartboard approach with individual stocks. On top of that, it's highly unlikely that those same funds will be able to achieve those market-beating returns over the next 35-year period, due to management turnover and ever-changing market dynamics that are hard to quickly adapt to. It is possible that they struck gold on a few investment choices which bumped their returns, but that's no reason to think that the same will happen again in the future. Just because a fund has an excellent year doesn't provide any clues to future performance. The markets change extraordinarily fast, so what has worked for managers in prior years may or may not work in the future. For example, during some time frames, the energy sector could outperform the entire market. During other times, energy could be lagging while the real estate sector does much better. It's very difficult for fund managers to identify and act on these trends. Investors who own the entire market are able to receive gains from the market as a whole. Just take a look at the dot-com boom of the late 90s. For a few years, there was a huge boom where this sector dominated the entire market. Investors who were capitalizing on this opportunity were laughing at people who were investing in the entire market. But a couple of years later, there was a huge collapse, causing greedy investors to lose much of their money. There is money to be made by taking advantage of times like this, but it's far more risky and likely to result in a loss. Index funds are well established and have little changes, allowing them to be solid investments over long periods, and making it certain that they will perform well in coming years. Actively managed mutual funds have many different factors that play into their returns, including their managers, regulations, short-term investment choices, and more, making it much more difficult for a company to endure market-beating returns. A successful manager could quit, retire, take another job opportunity, or leave the company for a plethora of reasons. Mutual funds must comply with certain regulations that are established by the SEC that hinder potential investment returns. For example, managers can only have a certain percentage of their holdings in one particular investment at any given time, limiting their ability to take advantage of investment opportunities that are supposed to double immediately, decreasing the potential differences when compared to index funds. Why pay high fees to a manager that has many limitations when it comes to securing investments? As previously mentioned, a fund manager could get lucky for a few years, averaging a 15% return, but there's absolutely no guarantee that it's going to happen again. In fact, the opposite could be true. Investors paying 2% of their portfolio in annual fees will be happy when the manager has a great year with a 17% return, but they probably won't be too thrilled when the manager has a year returning only 7%, while still charging the same 2% in fees. With index funds, there's less unknown when you're tracking overall market performance. Own the entire stock market because not all indexes are equal. Bogle recommends investing in a fund that's diversified over the entire stock market, owning all different sectors like the S&P 500. A fund like this enjoys exposure to every section of the market, so when one sector outperforms, you receive some of the profit. But when a particular sector doesn't do so well, it doesn't have a huge impact on your portfolio. The same could be said for a total stock market fund that holds companies of all different sizes instead of only large companies held on the S&P 500. Investing in a broad market fund will ensure you're spreading the risk across all different sectors and companies, so you can enjoy profits when things go well, and of course some small losses of underperforming companies and sectors. The real money is made by investing and owning companies over the long term, not buying and selling or trading over short time periods. Even though this strategy might work in the short term, it's unlikely to work reliably for many years repeatedly. Benjamin Graham and Warren Buffett's investing strategies both align with broad market index fund investing. In fact, Warren Buffett suggests that investors put the majority of their money in an S&P 500 index fund. Perhaps this is partly due to the fact that his company, Berkshire Hathaway, fails to beat the market, and as he recently said, a $10,000 investment in the S&P 500 in 1942 would be worth over $50 million today. Buffett might know a thing or two about investing since he started buying stocks at age 11 and has been able to achieve an astonishing net worth of over $80 billion. Buying the cheapest index fund will make you the most money in theory. It's easy to choose index funds based on their cost alone when compared to actively managed funds, because an S&P 500 fund is the same with Vanguard, Fidelity, iShares, and other companies, whereas with an actively managed mutual fund, it's hard to compare based on price alone, because so many variables go into determining future performance. There are many more factors that must be considered, such as the likelihood of future market outperformance, holdings, cost, management, and other variables. In other words, mutual fund expenses don't correlate with their returns as they do with index funds. The expenses charged are often more than people realize. For example, an expense ratio of 2% on a $1 million nest egg is $20,000 per year, when compared to the average index fund, which would only charge around 1/10 of that, or $2,000 per year. Just think of that $18,000 saved as additional money deposited right into your account. John Bogle recommends keeping most of your portfolio in low-cost index funds and investing for the long term. With no more than 5% of your money, invest in individual stocks, gold, and other more speculative investments to add some excitement and possibilities. Keeping a small amount of funny money in your portfolio will allow you to play around with riskier assets without getting carried away and betting your entire life savings on the next best stock, guaranteed to make you a multimillionaire. In all fairness, it's reasonable to have a small percentage of your account to use for more exciting investments, since there's really no chance of striking gold with a broad market index fund. But if you have $1 million saved, don't allocate one penny more than $50,000 to these riskier investments. Investing in low-cost index funds will provide you with the most money in the future, according to John Bogle. Don't waste money paying mutual fund managers healthy salaries when those potentially market-beating returns will be diminished by higher expenses being charged year after year, even in poor economic conditions when the funds are losing money. How would you like to be charged 2% of your portfolio even during a year when your investments lose value? Fund managers can retire, change careers, or for some other reason hand investment responsibilities over to the next manager in line, perhaps someone without a stellar history. Instead, taking advantage of low-cost, broad market funds provides for low-cost diversification. This situation is perfect for retirement investors, without the headache and risk associated with choosing individual stocks. It's unlikely that your professional mutual fund manager will be able to beat the market over the coming decade, so there's really no reason to pay 10 times the cost of an index fund for that possibility.
About 3,000 years ago, in the city of Babylon, on a sunny afternoon, a poor man called Bensir is sitting in front of his house on a low wall. That day he was supposed to be creating a chariot to better deliver goods to his customers and earn more shekels for his family. But he sits dejectedly on a low wall in front of his house for the whole day and is pondering about something. His best friend Cobby, a lyre player, walks by and sees that Benzir isn't working. Cobby says to Benzir, "Things must be going well for you because you haven't worked all day. Would you mind lending me 2 shekels for the nobleman's feast?" And Benzir replies, "I don't even have 2 shekels to lend, not even to you, best friend. My wallet is empty." Cobby asks surprised, "Then why don't you work on the half-completed chariot in your workshop?" And Benzir answers, "It is because of a dream I had last night. In my dream I was rich, I had all the money I could want. I was able to give freely to the poor and purchase all my heart desired. Then suddenly I woke up and came to the realization that I have no money at all. And after that I had no motivation to work and sat down here on this wall." Benzir continues, "Cobby, you and I have worked hard our entire lives and earned a lot of shekels over the span of years. And yet, you don't have 2 shekels for the nobleman's feast left. And even I can't help you out with 2 shekels. How can this be? That 2 educated and hard-working men attained so little over all those years." Cobby wants to encourage Benzir by giving him some advice, but he can't. After a minute or 2 of thinking, Cobby says, "Benzir, I have an idea, maybe it'll help." Cobby says to Benzir, "I passed our mutual friend Arkad in the streets earlier today. His purse never empties and some speak of him as the richest man in Babylon. Let's go to him. He, of course, can teach us how to always have a full purse, how to accumulate wealth and how to keep our hard-earned shekels." Arkad is a person people later would call the richest man in Babylon. Not only is he the richest man in Babylon, moreover he's generous and not snobby at all like many other wealthy people in Babylon. He's friendly, humble and generous with his words and his shekels. And he never acted like he's something better than Cobby or Benzir because of the shekels he earns. Arkad agrees to teach Cobby, Benzir and everyone who wants to learn something about accumulating wealth the secrets he used to become the richest man in Babylon. And here are the best lessons from the book The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clason. The first lesson from Arkad is to pay yourself first. Arkad said that this sounds so simple, but only few people do this. It means to save 1/10 of your income every month. No matter if you earn 600, 2000, 5000, no matter if it's dollars, euros or shekels. If you earn $2,000 a month, the first thing you have to do when you get it is to put away 10%, which is $200. This is your payment. This is what you pay yourself. Arkad said that you might think, but isn't all the money I earn mine? But his answer is, no it doesn't. A huge part of the money you earn belongs to the people who sell you the hay for the donkey that drags your cart, or to the people who own the real estate you are living in and pay rent to. Or in today's world, the money you earn often belongs to the mobile phone company because you need that to call your friends, or to the car insurance company if you drive a car, and of course to the internet provider that you need to watch this YouTube video. You have signed a contract with them, and in that contract you promise to give money to them every month. So not all of the money you earn is yours. The government knows this law very well, that's why you have to pay them first, even before you get your $2,000 paycheck. This is what we call income taxes. So save 10% at the beginning of the month, not at the end. This is the first thing you should do when you get your paycheck. There will be 30 days until you will get your next paycheck. And often companies and especially the advertisers will find a way so that you spend your money on some emergency, like a new cell phone. Believe me, we are not that disciplined over the long run. Put it away at the beginning of the month and don't think about it. This really is the difference between the rich and the poor. Another one of Arkad's lessons is, live below your means. Arkad said that this one is very obvious. Keep more than you spend and you got some money left. But even though this is logical, our emotions often will persuade us to spend more than we earn. A good example is this. Imagine tomorrow at work your boss comes up to you and says, "Hey, I saw you worked hard and long hours and that you did some great work for the company. I will give you a raise." You will no longer earn $2,000 a month. You will now earn $3,000 a month. What would you do if you get such a raise? Most people immediately start thinking about all the great things they can now afford, and they will buy them. This was true 3,000 years ago in Babylon and is also true today. Today it often is a luxury car, a new smartphone, an expensive holiday trip, more expensive clothes, a fancy watch, or even a bigger apartment. But Arkad advises that the right thing to do to become wealthy is to maintain your current expense level, as if the raise never happened. If you want to know more about how rich people live, watch my video on the book The Millionaire Next Door, which I will link at the end of the video. Think of the paycheck you earn as your offense, and how much money you keep from that because you live below your means as your defense. Most people play an awesome offense, but have a lousy defense, and will end up with nothing at the end of the month, no matter how much they earn. And my favorite lesson from Arkad is, make money work for you. Arkad talks about how you should enslave your money. That way, you can someday stop working for money and let the money you earned work for you. Even when we're sleeping, when we are taking a break, or when we are on vacation. Arkad advises to think of the coins you invest as your personal slaves. They will work for you and produce more small coins. And these small coins will also grow and produce more and more small coins themselves. That will also grow and work for you. All this will happen without you doing anything. Just let them do their work and don't spend them. You have to remember that today there are many more ways we can invest our money than to put it into a bank account. Like stocks, real estate, businesses and so on. But you have to do the diligent effort to find great investments and let your money work for you. There is a thing called the compound effect. And it is something that really amazed me. Just look at this small chart. Imagine you want to make $10,000 work for you. If you do nothing and put $10,000 away for 40 years with 5% interest, you will get $70,400. Not too bad. But take $10,000 and put it away for the same time with 10% interest, you got $450,000. That's almost $500,000. And if you take the same $10,000 and put it away for the same 40 years and get 20% interest, you will own $14.7 million. And you have to do nothing else than put away $10,000 and wait. I think Arkad would agree that these stories and principles seem just as applicable today as they did in ancient times. If you like videos like this, Arkad also recommends to check out my other videos on how to get rich and how to stay rich, like Rich Dad Poor Dad and The Millionaire Next Door. And guys, thank you so much for your support, your likes, your comments and for sharing my videos. And of course, if you'd like to watch your way to success, subscribe to Minion No More.